Before I tell you this story, I want you to ask yourself one question. What would you do if the person who promised to love you turned that promise into a weapon? Imagine the person you trusted most, mocking you, tearing you down, making you believe you were nothing without them. Would you stay silent and endure it? Or would you finally rise and show them just how wrong they were? That's the question I lived with every single day of my marriage. My wife, Vanessa, had a cruel gift. She could cut me down with nothing more than a laugh. Sharp and merciless. A sound that still echoes in my chest like broken glass. She loved reminding me in front of everyone, friends, family, strangers, that I could never replace her. She believed she was untouchable, and for years, I believed her. I swallowed the humiliation, convinced myself endurance was strength. But what I didn't know then was that her arrogance was planting the very seed of her downfall. Because when someone pushes you to the edge, all it takes is one spark, one moment to set everything ablaze. Vanessa loved an audience. She thrived on it the way a flame thrives on oxygen, greedy, consuming, never satisfied. And I, for years, had been the perfect fuel. Her husband, her prop, the man who sat quietly while she played the star of her own cruel theater. I can still see it clearly. One evening, our living room filled with her friends, the table crowded with half-empty wine glasses, the air heavy with perfume and false laughter. Vanessa sat at the center, legs crossed, eyes gleaming with the thrill of being watched. She leaned back in her chair, swirled the wine in her glass, and smiled that sharp little smile I had come to dread. Then she said it her favorite line, the one she never tired of repeating. "You could never replace me." And then came the laugh. It wasn't the kind of laugh that invites joy. No, it was a weapon. Sharp, merciless, echoing in my ears like a hammer strike. Her friends followed suit, though their laughter was uneasy, cautious, as if they weren't sure if it was safer to join in or to stay silent. And I sat there, glass in hand, face calm. Though my heart pounded against my ribs, I had heard that laugh 100 times before. And for years, it cut me down every single time. But that night, something changed. For the first time, it didn't sting. It sparked. Vanessa had always believed herself untouchable. She thought no man would dare leave her. No one would ever look at me and see anything worth wanting. She carried herself like a queen. And I was her court jester, someone she could mock without consequence. And for years, I played along. I told myself marriage meant endurance. I told myself patience was love. I told myself silence was strength. But the truth was simpler. Darker. I had given her a stage, and she had turned me into the joke. The night wound down the way they always did. Vanessa paraded through the room, gathering empty glasses, tossing little barbs my way as if cruelty were part of her charm. When the last guest left, she kicked off her heels, slipped into her silk robe, and collapsed on the couch, her eyes half-lidded, her voice thick with self-satisfaction. She murmured, "You should be grateful. A woman like me could have anyone. You'd have no one. You could never replace me." Then she closed her eyes, drifting into sleep as if she hadn't just carved me open with her words. As if her mockery was nothing more than casual background noise. But for me, those words weren't background. They were fire. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling while she slept peacefully beside me. Her hair fanned across the pillow like a crown. She looked like a queen in her dreams. But in my reality, She was a tyrant, and for the first time, I realized something dangerous. She wasn't testing me when she mocked me. She was daring me to prove her wrong. It took years to reach that point. Years of being laughed at, diminished, treated like I was less than nothing. But that night was different. Her words no longer defined me. They challenged me. And deep inside, I felt a quiet storm beginning to form. A storm she never saw coming. Vanessa thought her laughter made her powerful. She thought it chained me to her forever. But in truth, every cruel word, every mocking smile, every cutting laugh was a spark. And one day soon, those sparks would ignite into a fire that would burn her illusion of control to the ground. Because what Vanessa never understood was simple: when you spend your life telling someone they could never replace you, you hand them the very reason to try. It wasn't me who first shattered Vanessa's illusion of control. It was her younger sister, Lily. Lily had always been the shadow in the room, the one people overlooked when Vanessa made her grand entrances, her dramatic speeches, her endless displays of superiority. Where Vanessa was loud and commanding, Lily was quiet, thoughtful. She sat at the edge of family gatherings, listening more than speaking, her presence so subtle that sometimes even I forgot she was there until her eyes found mine. At first, those glances meant nothing to me. A flicker of pity, I thought, a natural discomfort at watching her sister humiliate me with her sharp tongue. But over time, I began to see something else in them. Something steady, something burning. The moment everything shifted came after one of Vanessa's worst performances. We had hosted her parents, her siblings, and a few cousins for dinner. As always, Vanessa commanded the room like a stage actress, laughing the loudest at her own jokes, mocking me whenever the conversation allowed. She told the story of the time I forgot to bring wine to her friend's birthday, exaggerated it until it became a cruel punchline, and ended the tale with her favorite declaration: he could never replace me. The room filled with uneasy laughter. Some chuckled out of habit. Others exchanged looks that spoke of discomfort. But no one said anything. I kept my face calm, though inside my chest a quiet fury throbbed with every beat of my heart. When the night ended and guests drifted out, Vanessa retreated upstairs to change. That's when Lily lingered by the door. Everyone else was gone. But she didn't move. She stood there, hesitating, her hand wrapped tightly around her bag strap, as if holding herself back. And then, almost in a whisper, she said the words that broke something inside me. I don't know how you stand it. I froze. It wasn't pity in her voice. It was anger. Anger on my behalf. And that was something I had never felt before. Someone angry, not at me, but for me. Those 6 words cut through me deeper than Vanessa's years of cruelty ever had. Because in that moment, I realized someone saw me. Not the clown Vanessa paraded in front of her audience. Not the weak man she painted me as. But the truth, a man who had endured far too much, far too long. From that day on, Lily's presence became something I could no longer ignore. She began showing up more often. Always with excuses Vanessa accepted without a second thought. She would drop off groceries, saying she had bought too much. She would bring leftovers from her apartment, claiming she didn't want them to go to waste. She'd mention errands their mother had asked her to run. Every reason sounded ordinary, believable, but the way her eyes sought mine every time told me otherwise. And in those small visits, she asked questions Vanessa had never cared to ask. How's work been? She'd say softly, handing me a container of food. What are you reading these days? She'd ask. glancing at the books stacked on my desk. What do you really want for yourself? Ethan. No one had asked me that last question in years. At first, I brushed it off, wary of her motives. I didn't trust kindness anymore. Vanessa had trained me to expect cruelty in every gesture, mockery in every smile. But Lily wasn't like her sister. She didn't laugh at me when I stumbled over my words. She didn't roll her eyes when I admitted frustrations at work. She didn't dismiss me when I spoke about the things I wanted but had long ago buried. She listened, and listening, I would soon learn, is the most dangerous form of intimacy. The more she noticed me, the more alive I began to feel. A brush of her hand when she passed me a dish, the way her shoulder lingered against mine when we sat side by side, the way her eyes held mine across the dinner table while Vanessa bragged, oblivious to everything but herself. None of it was spoken aloud. None of it needed to be. There was one evening that carved itself into me forever. Vanessa had hosted another family dinner, her favorite kind of performance. She floated from guest to guest, basking in their attention. Her voice, carrying like a queen, making proclamations. But Lily sat quietly beside me. And when she reached for the breadbasket, her hand touched mine and stayed there just a moment too long. It was nothing. A second, less than a second. But it was everything. My pulse quickened, my chest tightened, and for the first time in years, I felt something I thought I had lost. Possibility. From that night on, the silence between Lily and me grew heavier with meaning. When Vanessa mocked me, Lily's frown deepened. When Vanessa laughed, Lily's eyes searched mine. Steady, unflinching. And when Vanessa wasn't looking, Lily's gaze burned into me with something dangerous. Something alive. Something we both knew we should never name. I began to realize that I wasn't simply enduring anymore. I was waiting for the moment when the storm Vanessa had created would finally break, and when it did, Lily would be the lightning inside it, because she wasn't just her sister. She wasn't just a witness to Vanessa's cruelty. Lily was the spark, and I knew, deep down, that spark was about to ignite a fire neither of us could control. The more Vanessa mocked me, the less her words cut. For years, her laughter had pierced like knives, each one a reminder of how powerless I was. But now, her voice no longer carried the same weight, because in the shadows of her cruelty, I had found something stronger. I had found Lily. It began with small things. A glance across a crowded room, a soft smile when no one was watching, the brush of her hand against mine that lingered longer than it should. But those small sparks grew, and with each passing day, they lit a fire inside me that Vanessa could neither see nor extinguish. Vanessa was too blinded by her own arrogance. She still believed I was bound to her, that my silence meant loyalty, that her cruelty would always go unchallenged. She never noticed the shift in me, the way her words no longer pierced, but slid off like dull blades. She never saw the quiet power I carried, now not because of her, but because of the one person she underestimated most, Lily. She became the anchor in my storm. She began showing up more often, and every time she did, the air in the house changed. If Vanessa was fire wild, destructive, consuming, then Lily was water. She was steady, calm, cooling the flames Vanessa tried to burn me with. One evening stands out in my memory. Vanessa had hosted yet another dinner for her friends. Eager to play her role as the perfect hostess, she flitted around the table, wine glass in hand, showering her guests with charm and slicing me open with jokes at my expense. And then, right in the middle of her performance, Lily's eyes found mine across the table. She didn't laugh. She didn't even smile. Instead, her lips pressed into a firm line, her gaze steady and unflinching. That look told me everything she saw through Vanessa. She saw through the illusion, and she saw me. Later that night, while Vanessa disappeared upstairs to change into yet another dress to impress her audience, I found myself in the kitchen rinsing plates just to avoid her. The water ran over my hands. The clinking of dishes, the only sound in the room. Then Lily slipped in quietly. She leaned against the counter, arms folded, eyes locked on me. "You don't have to take it anymore," she said softly. I froze. For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard her right, but her eyes told me I had. I turned to her, water dripping from my hands, my chest tight. "You think it's that easy?" I asked. Lily stepped closer, her voice low but steady. "No, I think it's hard, but I think she's wrong. She thinks no one could want you, Ethan, but I see you. I see everything she doesn't." Her words struck me harder than any insult Vanessa had ever thrown, because for the first time in years, I believed them. She wasn't lying. She wasn't flattering me out of pity. She was telling me the truth Vanessa could never admit. The silence between us thickened, heavy with everything unspoken. For a moment, I thought I might step forward, close the distance, let the fire inside me consume us both. But before I could, Vanessa's voice floated down the stairs, calling Lily's name, just like that. The moment broke. Lily's cheeks flushed, and she slipped past me into the living room, leaving me standing there with my hands trembling under the running water. From that night on, nothing was the same. Every gathering, every dinner, every casual night at home became a battlefield of hidden glances and stolen moments. Vanessa mocked me more sharply, as if she could sense her grip slipping. But I didn't flinch anymore. I didn't shrink under her words. And the less I reacted, the more desperate her laughter became, as though she needed my pain to validate her power. Lily, meanwhile, became bolder in her silence. She didn't laugh along with the others. She didn't pretend her sister's cruelty was harmless fun. Instead, she let her silence speak volumes. A hand on my arm when no one was looking. A glance that burned across the table. A whispered word that lingered in my chest long after she left. The tension grew unbearable. One night, Vanessa invited her parents, her brother, and Lily over for dinner. She strutted through the evening like always, mocking me in front of her family, laughing loudly at her own cruel jokes. But as she basked in her imagined spotlight, something else happened under the table. Lily's hand brushed against mine. At first it was an accident, or at least that's what I told myself. But then, her fingers pressed against mine deliberately. Steady, sure. I didn't look at her. I didn't dare. But I held on, and in that quiet, hidden touch, I felt more power than I had in years. Vanessa continued her performance, oblivious to the betrayal unfolding inches away. She laughed, raised her glass, told her favorite story. "You see, Ethan could never replace me. No one else would ever want him." Her words echoed in the room, bouncing off the walls like they always had. But this time, I wasn't listening. I was holding Lily's hand beneath the table. And in that touch was the truth. Vanessa would never see she was already being replaced. That night, I lay in bed beside her as she slept. Her breathing even, her face calm. She dreamed of control, of invincibility. But I stared at the ceiling, my heart racing with the knowledge that everything had changed. For years, Vanessa had believed her laughter kept me chained to her. She never realized that each cruel word was cutting the rope thinner and thinner. And now, with Lily's hand in mine, that rope had finally snapped. I was no longer bound. I was waiting, and soon, Vanessa would discover the truth she had mocked into existence, that no one is irreplaceable. Vanessa lived for her dinner parties. They were her kingdom, her stage, her way of reminding the world that she reigned supreme. She planned them weeks in advance, down to the smallest detail. The polished silverware, the carefully chosen wine, the dramatic dresses she wore as though each evening were a coronation. To her, these nights were proof of her untouchable power. That night was no different, or so she thought. The house glowed with candles, laughter spilling into every room as relatives and friends gathered around the long dining table. Vanessa, dressed in a crimson gown that caught the chandelier light, swept through the room like a queen among peasants. She told stories, exaggerated tales of her accomplishments, and slipped in little jokes at my expense, each one sharper than the last. The guests laughed, though uneasily. They always did. I sat quietly, as I always had. But this time, my silence was not surrender. It was resolve, because I knew something she didn't. Something that would shatter her illusion forever. Lily sat 2 chairs away, dressed simply in black, her presence understated yet impossible to ignore. She didn't need the crimson gowns, the loud laughter, the sparkling jewelry. She carried a quiet strength that drew me more than any of Vanessa's theatrics ever could. And when her eyes met mine across the table, steady and unflinching, I felt that the storm inside me was ready to break. Dinner wound down, plates cleared, glass refilled. Vanessa raised her wine, her smirk wide, her eyes gleaming with that cruel confidence. And then, right on cue, she delivered the line she loved most. See, Ethan could never replace me. No one else would ever want him. The words hung in the air like poison. Some guests chuckled weakly. Others shifted in their seats, their eyes darting toward me. They expected me to do what I always did, smile faintly, swallow the insult, pretend I wasn't bleeding. But not this time. Slowly, deliberately, I pushed my chair back. The scrape of wood against the floor silenced the room. Every eye turned to me. Vanessa froze, her glass halfway to her lips, confusion flickering across her face. I stood, calm, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. Without a word, I crossed the room to where Lily sat. The silence was deafening, the weight of it pressing on every guest in the room. And then, in one motion that could never be undone, I reached down and took her hand. Gasps erupted, forks clattered against plates. A cousin muttered something under his breath. Lily didn't flinch. She didn't hide. She rose to her feet beside me, her head high, her hand gripping mine tightly. Vanessa's face drained of color. The smirk that had carried her for years vanished, replaced by wide-eyed shock. What is this?" she stammered. Her voice cracked, desperation bleeding into every word. "This is a joke, right? Tell me, this is a joke." I met her gaze, steady, unshag. "You always said I could never replace you." I said, my voice carrying through the stunned silence. "But you were wrong. I found someone who sees me for who I am. Someone you never could." The whispers spread like wildfire. Relatives exchanged horrified glances. Friends covered their mouths. Vanessa slammed her glass down so hard it shattered, red wine spilling across the table like blood. "This is betrayal," she screamed, her voice sharp, wild. "You've betrayed me." But no one rushed to her side. No one defended her. Because every person in that room had witnessed her cruelty, her endless mockery, her relentless need to tear me down. They knew this wasn't sudden. This was inevitable. The collapse of a throne she had built on arrogance and humiliation. Lily stepped forward, still holding my hand. Her voice was calm, clear, cutting through the chaos. "You did this to yourself. Vanessa, you spent years tearing him down, treating him like he was nothing. But he isn't nothing. He's everything you refuse to see." Vanessa's scream broke into a sob, her face twisted with fury and pain, her eyes darting wildly around the table, searching for someone, anyone to take her side. But all she found were averted eyes and whispered judgments. For the first time in her life, Vanessa was truly alone. I stood tall, Lily beside me, my voice stronger than it had ever been. "You thought I could never replace you?" I said, each word like steel. "But the truth is, no one is irreplaceable. Not even you." The room held its breath. The weight of my words pressed against every wall, every corner. And in that moment, Vanessa realized the empire she had built on mockery had finally crumbled beneath her feet. She stormed out in tears, her heels clicking furiously against the hardwood floor, her sobs echoing down the hall. Guests slipped away quietly, their faces pale with shock, the air thick with disbelief. But I didn't care. For the first time in years, I wasn't the man being laughed at. I was the man who had turned the laughter back on her. I was the man who had finally broken free. As Lily and I left together that night, the weight of years lifted from my shoulders. Vanessa's favorite weapon, her cruel words, had become the noose that strangled her illusion of control. She had thought herself untouchable. She had thought herself irreplaceable. But she was wrong, and the proof was standing right beside me, hand in mine. As we walked away from the ruins of her kingdom, the house was silent after the storm. Vanessa had vanished into her own fury, her footsteps echoing into nothing, her throne reduced to splinters of broken glass and spilled wine. The guests left in hushed disbelief, some shaking their heads, others whispering to each other about what they had witnessed. But I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt light. I wasn't the man shrinking under laughter anymore. I wasn't the fool at the center of her cruel jokes. I was free. As Lily and I walked out together, the night air hit my face like a baptism. Cool, cleansing, sharp with possibility. Her hand was still in mine. Firm, steady. Unashamed. And I knew then that Vanessa's greatest weapon, her voice, her arrogance, her mocking laughter, had destroyed only herself. She had spent years convincing me that I could never replace her, that I was nothing without her. But in the end, those very words became her downfall. Because the truth is simple. No one is irreplaceable, not even Vanessa. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking back. I was finally looking forward,